Hi, and sorry for the, I think I should have been clearer on the time, so I'm sorry about that. So today we're gonna have Ana Tuduri, who is joining us from Uruguay. He's actually a neighbor of mine. And she's gonna be talking about a really interesting project, the Environmental Participatory Monitoring of the Santa Lucía River in Uruguay. And before I introduce her and I give her the floor, of course, a reminder that we'll be recording the call, transcribing it, and sharing it on Appropedia. You can follow the agenda and take notes in the Google Doc that Shannon is sharing there in the chat. You can please go ahead and introduce yourself in the introduction section and leave your email if you want to receive information about future calls. And no worries, then we'll go through the document and make sure to remove all your email addresses so they are not stored there permanently. So we make sure of that. And you can also use the Zoom chat for comments and any other technical difficulties, or if you have questions for the speaker, you can leave them there too, although we'll have a round of questions afterwards. Please mute yourself if you're not speaking. And of course, we want to acknowledge that we're still in a pandemic and amid compounding crisis, so everyone is experiencing this differently, and please let's be kind and caring. So most of you already know why this calls. It's because we want to better understand how the movement can respond meaningful to the climate crisis. And if you want to learn more about what we've been talking about, you can always go back to our Appropedia page on Open Climate. And this is it. On my side now, the floor is all yours, Ana. And if you want to start sharing, just go ahead and let's get started.
Hello, good morning. Sorry for the late. was a mistake. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to talk to you about participatory monitoring in Santa Lucía. So I'm going to share my screen. Share. Can you see it? Yes. Okay.
Yes, perfectly.
So I'm going to stop here. Okay. My internet connection is a bit unstable, so I'm going to put off the camera and share the screen. So what is this? This is a project which started in 2018 with Rio Abierto project of the La Diaria, which is a local media from Uruguay, and Faculty of Science, motivated by the concern about the level of contamination of Santa Lucía River. Why is important this river? Because it supplies water for human consumption to 60% of our population. The existence of a healthy environment is necessary to guarantee human rights, and the case of water in the Santa Lucía is one of the problems that puts in problem or at risk this human right, no? In this context, we carry out in 2019 some workshops to identify the local environmental problems with the participation of local authorities, neighbors, and teachers, and a social organization called Asamblea por el Agua. So this is Rio Abierto, the project that I was talking about. And these are the workshops we made in Santa Lucía City with neighbors, local authorities, and students, teachers. So in that context, we work collaboratively to determine the sample points for monitoring and determine the timing. And in addition, we identify the difficulty in validate the data collected by citizens. So in 2020, sorry, We designed a course in order to provide a framework from the monitoring, which is carried out between the Faculty of Science and Faculty of Information and Communication and La Diaria, which is a local media. This course allows to certification the data, training to take samples, possibility the creation of protocols and works on the monitoring process from a human rights approach. The first edition of this course started in 2021. And in the first edition participate 20 college students, the special school number 2255, the rural school 13, and the rural school 100. And Asamblea por el Agua, La Diaria, Faculty of Science, and the other Faculty of Information and Communication. This citizen participation and action initiative is based on the human right to access of water for human consumption and the right to health, as well as the possibility of living and developing in a healthy environment. We understand that the development of the monitors requires focus on human rights, such as the right to healthy environment, access to drinking water and sanitation, health, food, and the rights of local communities, attention to natural disasters, and people displaced by environmental events. Public participation in the management and of natural resources, access to public information, and justice. What have been the achievement of this project today is this process made visible the specific problems in the school and the social groups, contributed to starting in the process of teaching and social participation around water quality problems, democratize access to information on water management and quality, dynamize and making visible the citizen participation in the management and control of water, facilitate the construction of knowledge and possibility of the providing tools to carry out the participatory monitoring. And it has been a virtuous space in which university students, professionals, social actors, and teachers involved in the process and are being training for this participatory monitoring. So we have really good features. In the second edition, we are working on making the information available in an open format, and we are working in how to communicate information in an assertive manner. So the questions right now for us is, what are the necessary and useful data for the actors involved in the monitoring? How to communicate data in a more accessible way, and how to turn that information in action. So this year is the second edition, and we have 13 students and the same schools. So I don't know if you have some questions about.
Yes, I think we weren't sure whether you had finished or not, Ana,
okay.
but,
sorry.
So can we go ahead and like ask questions now, or yeah?
Yes.
So I think that one of the things that we find more interesting about your project, I mean, like this project has a lot of like interesting angles to it, right? Like definitely involving with the community, involving with like local schools. I mean, like only the pictures are awesome, right? Like let me tell you that. But I think that one of the things that we find more interesting is like the fact that this project is based in Uruguay, and something that we haven't talked a lot about in the calls are around like well, the situation of environmental defenders in Latin America. And in particular, like we have a legal framework here in Latin America, the Escazú Agreement, that kind of sets up the scene for the relationship between environmental data and human rights. And we were thinking, given that you have a background as a lawyer, actually an environmental lawyer, if maybe you could talk a little bit about how do you see the relationship of this project with the Escazú Agreement and the human rights implications?
Yes, the development of this monitoring requires a focus on human rights. So it's really important that what you are saying. Uruguay's, the Constitution of Uruguay established that the access to water, potable water and sanitation is a fundamental right. So, and even more, Uruguay approved the National Water Policy and the National Water Plan, whose guidelines are sustainable water management, water risk management, coordination and planning of public policies, as well as the promotion of the education, research and innovation for the management of water resources. Recently, the Human Rights Council recognized the right to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And Uruguay has ratified various international standards on environmental matters, including the Escazú Agreement on access to information, public participation, and access to justice in environmental matters. So I think Uruguay is in the good way, or in the good, how do I say, in el buen camino, in the good way?
In the good path, in the good path.
In the good path. But now we need implementation, no? Rules for implementation, the Escazú Agreement. So that is what happened right now in Uruguay.
Could you, just on your last point, so the implementation process, can you talk about how you might envision that happening, either using this specific project to kind of pinpoint parts, or talking about it a bit more broadly?
Well, first of all, we need a law, which, how do you say, reglamentar?
Like the guidelines for implementation, like a rule for implementation?
Yes, like that. So right now we have a good law of access information, but I think the Escazú Agreement made some changes. So we have now access information, a general access information process, and a specific access to information for environmental problems or environmental matters. So this regulation is really necessary. So it's all I can say right now about that. Uruguay has some space for participation, for social participation in environmental matters, but in the reality, it don't work well. So maybe it's a good point to start, no? Related to justice about environmental problems, we don't have data about that. So I don't know what is happening right now. I think these 3 points are important for the implementation of the Escazú Agreement: the access to information, the participation, and data about the justice in environmental issues.
Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, it sounds like, Uruguay has decent public data on stuff, but you designed this participatory program working with youth. I'm wondering, what gap are you filling in the public kind of data collection space with the participatory project, and like how does like working in a way where you're also creating open data like benefit the project? Is it just, you know, like you're supplementing the government, or is there something kind of deeper going on there?
I think the gap is the real participation for citizens in these matters. So, and strengthening the process of teaching and social participation around water quality problems. So I think this kind of projects are good, or are giving an opportunity to boys and girls to have the first experience with science. So I think that is really remarkable. And about data, I think the problem with the government data and this, or the difference of the data we collect, is this data responds to the problems that the local society or local community have. So the construction of this data responds to what, when, and why. What this information is useful, when it's useful, because sometimes the information for the government is available, but before after the problem. So it's a matter of time, you know. Maybe you need the information before, and the government publish it after. So and for who is important that information, or for who is useful that information? In this case, the information we collect is useful for these kids, for these schools, for the local community, for the organization which is in Santa Lucía.
As kind of a follow-up to that, I know Uruguay didn't have like the health-based environmental movement until like the 90s, right after the lead cases and Montevideo and the surrounding areas. And I'm wondering, like, is there a public demand for this kind of like environmental health stuff, and what like problems are you responding to in the community? You kind of talked about it generally, but like what specific things are you testing for and in these communities?
I think the demand it's about we are testing the quality of water, the potable water, or because I think it was in 2026, some events related to bad odor and how do I say sabor?
Taste,
taste.
flavor and taste. Yeah.
Yes, happened in I think also in 2016. So in that moment we start about the level of contamination of this river. No before, was in that occasion. So we try to, sorry, I have, my battery is low. This is not working. Sorry, I have to move a bit because my battery is low.
No worries, Anna. These things can happen all the time.
Really?
So,
I'm
no.
sorry, I'm late. My battery is
No,
low.
no. Hey, like as we said before starting the school, like we're amid the compounding crisis. So like everyone like can have no worries.
Okay.
In the meantime, you know, something that we can do say about Uruguay, which is relevant to the conversation, is that the government actually has like a lot of policies around publishing open data. So there are some, good tools there for doing at least some environmental monitoring. In the case of climate change, for example, they do publish their national determined contributions. They are all published online. You can like follow and track the greenhouse emissions by sector. And they have like very good disaggregated data that is all like openly licensed. So at least some things they are doing quite well. And they actually, the World Resources Institute published a couple of years ago, they did a research on implementing open data strategies for climate action, and they look at 2 cases, one in Chile and one in Uruguay. And this is the paper in case anyone is interested about like learning a little bit more about these open data strategies and how the World Resources Institute looked into that. And yeah, and while we wait for Ana, I don't know, Ana, if you could solve your issue.
Yes, yes, I did it. I don't remember the question. Sorry.
So the question was whether there was a demand for the environmental health issues, whether there was a community that was making this demand.
Okay, the demand was more participation in these issues, in these problems. They say the data that the data that the government publish is not simple to read, or it's super complex for understand for the local community. So in the next steps of this project, we try to work in this problem to make the data more accessible and take this data and make actions with it. I don't know if I understand your question, sorry.
Yeah, and there's also a question by Alison there on the side chat. She's saying, thank you, Ana, interesting project. Along the lines that, with Alex, I think that she's referring to the previous question. How was the process like when working on sharing the data as open access? What methodology did you use?
Well, I have to say we are working this year in that process. So maybe in a next opportunity I can share with you how about it. So.
Well, but I'm also seeing in your pictures that, for example, you have taken the show of blurring the images, like yes, all of them, right? One? Like, yeah, like you've made the effort to blur the images of kids. Like you have.
Yes, of course. But that is because I'm a lawyer.
But you're following some ethical guidelines there,
yes,
right?
Of course. So we have last year we worked really hard in protocols. One of these things is what variables we are going to test, and how to certificate the data we collect. So in this picture, for example, you can see that we have a protocol, colors and so stuff. So I can share it if you want it. It's in Spanish, the protocols, but maybe it's helpful.
Yeah, Shannon, do you want to go ahead and ask your question directly?
This goes back to a point that you made right before you answered Allison's question. You started talking about the reusability of data that already exists. I think primarily coming from government. And I'm just curious if you've thought about what that process will look like, or, you know, more specifically in working with the communities you're working with, if you yet have an understanding of, you know, what format, I guess I'll leave it there, what format the data would be most useful in.
So we work with scientific teachers, so they have the they create the protocols and this kind of things. So I don't know too much about it.
Well, but you do have a sense of what the community needs, right? What are the barriers that they have to accessing the government data, right?
Oh, see. Well, this organization called Asamblea por el Agua demand that they made a lot of access info requests, and they never have an answer about it. So in this process, we work together to understand how to make a access info request and try to make some of this request again with the students. So it was a good example of how to try to help the community. I don't know if this answers your question.
Yep, and I see two questions more from Emilio and from Jean Noé. Emilio, if you want to go ahead and ask it.
Yeah. So my question is regarding the concept of open data, and we usually think of what happens after. There's a data set, a bunch of numbers, and it's available. But to organize all these workshops and getting a community together, etc., there's a lot of know-how and information that's super useful, especially if you've never done it before. And considering piggybacking on what you mentioned on the previous answer, that scientists came and they're the ones who know how to do this, right? This happens, I believe, very often, that there are experts on fields and they're the ones to say what to do and create the protocols. So I was wondering, what kind of information do you think that could be useful to you or to other people if it were online, to have this before the data is measured, before everything?
I would like to say that these protocols were made together, collaborative with the community. Wasn't there some scientists who say this is what we have to do, blah blah blah? No, it was a collaborative process. We listened all of the actors, and the decisions were taken together. So I think it's different, or it's a different way of doing science. And I don't remember your question.
Yeah, the question is, what kind of information would be useful? Because that is something that I'm super interested in. Like, what kinds of tools could be provided to you, be available online, other than having, this is data sets and bunch of numbers? What kinds of things would be useful? Like, I don't know, how to do a community workshop on, or I don't know, what kind of information do you think that could be useful for future projects like yours?
I think the process, how we make this monitoring, the steps we were doing, and how we work together in this construction of the protocols. Maybe that data is really useful for other people in other part of the world, and how to involve kids, because it's a great job that the students from the universities do. It was really difficult. We are talking about scientific data, so it's difficult for me to understand that data. Imagine a kid. So it was a great show. I don't know.
I see there's a question by Sean Noé. Sean Noé, do you want to ask it directly? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, no problem. So thank you for the presentation. I made note that you're coming from a legal background with the work that you're doing. So I'm just curious if there is a kind of explicit or maybe kind of indirect connection to environmental rights through the work that you're doing. How has the data that's been collected and produced through your initiative, especially if it comes in partnership or in collaboration with scientists? So, you talked about reliable data that's sometimes a little bit difficult to understand. So I'm wondering, is there also a kind of an interpretation of the scientific data on water that can also lend itself to maybe anti-corruption or anti-collusion, from an environmental rights perspective? If not, that's cool. But I'm just curious if there is a connection to a legal and anti-corruption angle.
I don't know which is the. I don't understand the question. Sorry.
I'll try to. Do you want me to try to reframe it, Sean?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're trying to say is like whether this data is useful for bringing up legal cases.
Yes.
Oh, I am not sure. They have a specific case, a legal specific case in Santa Lucía related to a fabric. How do you say grasa? It's una fábrica de grasa.
Like a grease factory. Factory.
Yes, but I don't think this data we are collecting is useful for that case. I think right now it's useful for education, for the first approach to science for kids, and imagine this is a process. We need a long term to compare data. So this is the second edition this year. Maybe we need more time. Maybe we need 10 years more or 5 years more for doing something like that. For saying, well, we can compare the data from 2021 and 2020. I don't know, 2025, 25. I don't know, in 5 years more. And if we are talking about legal procedures, I think you need an expert or you need tests that are validating for that, for the legal case. How do I say perito? You need a perito.
Like a
forensic
expert.
Yes, I don't think this data is useful for a legal case. Not right now, maybe in the future.
You have another question, Luis Felipe. Do you want to go ahead and ask it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ana, for sharing your work with us. I'm your neighbor from Rio Grande do Sul. So your landscape is very familiar to me. I have a question for you, which is maybe a bit more abstract, but is very practical, based on what you showed us in your pictures and the things you have been doing in the project, which is about the notion of abertura, or the notion of openness. If you could tell us a bit more about the discussions that you have with the researchers and the students and the research participants about the notion of openness, the importance of openness, and how effective you think our debates, more expert debates about openness are, in fact, for the work that you need to do on the ground with students and community members.
So in Uruguay, we have a good observatory for the government who has open data. So I think it's not the question about the open data. The question on the demand is about the participation in these matters, and how to involve the future generations in these topics, you know. I think the other thing is so important for the community is they demand to have an opinion in the when they decide the policies around the quality of the water. So I think it's not about the openness or the open data, it's about participation, it's about the real participation in these matters.
Yeah, so it's about meaningful participation and voice.
Sorry for my bad English, but I think I don't know if I explained correctly.
No, it's perfect. It's really clear and perfect. So it is. So you think openness appears more as a tool or an accessory or something that is in comparison to these other themes?
I think the openness is a tool, but it's not enough. So we need to improve other areas or other topics. So I think it's really important the participation, the real participation of the citizens in these matters. And I think it's really, really important to start to talk about the justice in this case, the justice in environmental issues or environmental cases. We don't have data about that in Uruguay. We don't know what is happening in this in injustice about.
Yes, understood. Thank you.
I think Ana was breaking up a little bit. Ana, are you still there? Let's see. Ana, are you there? Oh, yeah, now we can listen to you.
Okay. I was saying that for me, the real problem is the participation, the real participation, and the data about justice in these cases, in environmental issues, and the access to justice. We don't know nothing about that.
Monica, I see you have your hand up. Do you want to go ahead and ask?
Yeah, I'm just following up a little bit on what you were just talking about, Ana. How do participants find out about your project? How are you connecting with them? How are members of the community finding out about this work?
Can you repeat me again, because I listened parts of what you are saying?
Yeah. I'm curious how do community members find out about this project? How are they for them to come to participate? How do they even know about it? How are you reaching out to them?
Oh, okay. The background was a project from La Diaria, which was called Rio Abierto. This one, the picture is in the screen. So in that opportunity, we published some notes in La Diaria, which is a local media, and invited all the neighbors and the local authorities. And we moved to territory. We moved to Santa Lucía City, and we have the collaboration from an organization called Asamblea por el Agua, which is from they have a lot of neighbors from the city, so it was easy to catch up with the neighbors and with the students for the local community. And we work with schools from the city, so I think.
And what level is this? Are these university students or high school students? I'm curious.
Yes, yes. We have university students, and we have boys and girls for public schools.
Okay.
We work together. The university students, the teachers from the schools and the universities, and the kids from the schools. And we have right now 3 different kind of schools: rural school, urban school, and a special school. So it's it's really exciting.
Many different age groups.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And different kind of school, you know, a rural school, a urban school for the city, Santa Lucía, and a special school. So we have special kids. So it's really, how to say, amplio.
Very broad.
Broad, yeah. Thank you.
I'm wondering if you think there are like distinct elements of like Uruguayan community culture that make this kind of project either really easy or really hard. Like, you know, I've spent time in Uruguay, and like I see that there's a lot of like this picture of people sitting around in a circle. I've seen that before a lot. And I'm wondering like if that kind of collective decision making made it like easier to convene people and facilitate it, or if it was like challenging on many different dimensions. Yeah.
You know, this topic is tough. So when you are thinking about to make a workshop with authorities, it's hard. How to invite them. So the word was like a camino de hormiga. I don't know how to say in English. Was really hard, was tough. But I think maybe the potential of this project was we work with a media, with the second important media in Uruguay, which is La Diaria. So I think that was useful to motivate the authorities to participate in the monitoring. Maybe it's my appreciation, maybe it's wrong, but I think that was useful. But the process was really tough, rude. Yeah. And the other thing was is difficult is to validate the citizen data. So because the government say they do the same samples or tests, and so certificate the data we are collecting was an issue. For that reason, we try to make a framework, or we planned this framework with the Faculty of Science, and we planned this course to training the people and to validate the data.
Can I have a question for you,
Yes.
and it's more like asking for advice, in the sense that those of us who work in the open movement, we're very used to very abstract reasoning regarding, openness and what's the, the type of right that's being used in this, and or what's the best license. And the reason why we are working on open climate is because we want to be relevant to projects like yours that go on a river, they get their feet wet, get data, and not necessarily for people who are doing academic work about which license is the best. And that makes it, and this is like a complaint that makes it not interesting to people who are into the abstract, right? But one of the things that I really liked about your project, and we didn't speak too much about it, is how you're connecting the action with with human rights, right? That's important. So how can openness be useful to you, or what are the tools that are the most useful? Is it in learning, in developing the project? Is it in communications? Where does openness can be useful so that communities around the world can think about releasing information for projects like yours?
I think maybe it's how to communicate this data in a simple way. In an open format, but in a simple way. I think maybe would be a good thing to work on. Maybe you can help us. Why not? So, and the thing I think is important about openness is that the information needs to answer the demands of the community, and in the process of making this data or collecting this data, the local community needs to be involved. So I think maybe this is the goal of this project. The community is involved in the construction of the data or the structure of data, in the process of decide which data we need or they need, really. So.
And I see there's a question from. Sorry, are you still there, Ana?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yes, no, I like you broke up for a second and I thought that you were finished.
Like
I'm sorry.
blah blah blah. The connection is illegal. So sorry.
No worries, no worries. Like this can happen totally. So we have time for one more question, and I see that Sean Noe put a question there in the chat, and he's asking, was the data validated by government officials ever contested by the community?
Sorry, Evelyn, can you see it again?
Yes, so the question is if like the data that the government produced, like did the community ever said like, no, you have the wrong data, or no, this is not correct? So have they ever like fought against the data that the government provided?
No, I don't think that is the problem. The problem is maybe the data that the government publish is no updating, or is not what they need. So I think it's that, right? Or maybe another problem is they don't understand that the data that is published.
So it sounds more like a mismatch, not necessarily like a fight.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I think that we don't have any more time for any more questions. This was really interesting. I really like this project. It touches on a lot of like very nice things, like working with communities, working to make participation on environmental issues more open. So I want to thank you again, Ana, for being here today, and thanks everyone else for being here too. And remember to follow the information on the Apropedia page. That's normally where we paste everything. And if any of you wants to keep on receiving information, remember to sign up on the notes doc. And yeah, we'll be posting the recording. And thanks again, Ana, for making the effort. Yeah,
Thank you so much. Sorry for the delay, unstable connection, and my bad English, but
no, your English is perfect.
It was a
On the contrary, thank you for making the effort of talking to us in your second language. That's totally a thing. So really appreciate that. Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.